3 years ago, I took a solo trip to a small coastal town called Seabrook in Washington State. It was October, cold, windy, and almost deserted. Exactly the kind of place I like. The locals kept telling me the same thing though. Don't stay on the beach after dark. At first I thought it was just typical small town superstition. Maybe something about tides or storms. I didn't ask too many questions. My name is Kevin Harris, and at that time, I was filming quiet coastal landscapes for a small YouTube channel. Sunset shots, night waves, things like that. So naturally the best time for filming was late evening. On my second night there, I carried my tripod down to the beach around 7:30 p.m. The sky was turning deep orange and purple, and the wind was strong enough that you could hear it whistling through the driftwood scattered across the sand. The beach was empty, not a single person. I walked for about 10 minutes until the lights of the town were barely visible behind me. Just ocean sand and darkness creeping in. Perfect filming spot. I set my tripod facing the water and started recording the waves crashing against the shore. The only sound were the wind and the water. It felt peaceful in a strange way. After about 20 minutes, I heard something. Footsteps. At first I thought maybe another photographer had come down the beach, but when I turned around there was nobody there. Just the long stretch of sand and the black outline of the dunes. I remember laughing a little at myself. Wind can make weird noises out there. I turned back to the ocean. A few seconds later I heard it again. Footsteps, this time closer. Slow, dragging steps. I spun around quickly. Still no one. The strange thing was the sand behind me looked disturbed, like someone had walked there recently. But the wind should have wiped those marks away. Yet there were faint impressions leading from the dunes toward where I was standing. That uneasy feeling started building in my stomach. I grabbed my camera and checked the recording screen. The lens had been pointing at the water the whole time. Then something moved in the background of the frame, way down the beach. A shape. At first I thought it was driftwood or maybe a rock. But it moved slightly, like someone shifting their weight. There was a person standing near the waterline about 50 yards away. I hadn't heard anyone approach from that direction. The figure was just standing there, completely still, facing the ocean. The light was fading fast, so all I could see was a tall silhouette. I called out, "Hey." No response. The figure didn't move. I remember thinking maybe they didn't hear me over the wind. So I waved my flashlight toward them. The moment the beam hit the figure, something felt wrong. The person was barefoot, and their clothes looked soaked. They were standing ankle deep in the freezing water, completely motionless. Then slowly, the figure turned its head toward me. Even from that distance, I could feel they were staring directly at me. And then they started walking toward me, very slowly. That's when I realized something that made my skin crawl. I hadn't heard those footsteps behind me earlier. They had been coming from the water. At first I told myself it was just another person walking the beach. But something about the way they moved didn't look normal. Their steps were slow, stiff, almost like they weren't used to walking. The tide was rising and the waves were crashing around their legs, but they didn't react at all. They just kept moving toward me through the dark water. The wind picked up harder, blowing sand across the beach. I stepped back and called out again. "Hey, are you okay?" No answer. They kept walking. Closer now, maybe 30 yards away. My flashlight beam hit their face for a second, and that's when my stomach dropped. Their skin looked pale. Not normal pale. Almost gray. Their hair was hanging wet across their face, and their eyes looked completely blank. No expression, no emotion, just staring. I remember feeling this heavy silence around us. Even the waves suddenly felt quieter somehow. Then the person stopped walking, right at the edge of the water, and they spoke, but the voice didn't sound right. It was low and hoarse, like someone who hadn't spoken in a long time. "Have you seen my boat?" I stood there frozen for a second. My brain was trying to process the situation logically. Maybe they were lost. Maybe a fisherman. Maybe someone drunk. But something still felt very wrong. I said, "No, I just got here. Do you need help?" The person tilted their head slightly. The way they did it reminded me of how animals watch you. Then they took another step forward onto the sand. That's when the flashlight beam dropped lower and I noticed something that made my heart start racing. Their feet. They were bleeding. Not small cuts. Deep wounds. Like they had been walking over rocks or broken shells for hours. But they didn't seem to feel any pain. They just kept staring at me. Then they asked again, "Have you seen my boat?" The voice was slower this time, almost confused. That was the moment I noticed something else. There were no footprints behind them in the wet sand near the water. The tide should have shown clear tracks, but there were none, just smooth sand. My instincts kicked in hard. I grabbed my tripod and camera and started backing away. "I'm going back to town," I said. "Someone there can help you." For the first time, the person's expression changed. They looked irritated, and then they started walking toward me again. Faster this time. Not running, but much faster. That's when fear hit me properly. I turned and started walking quickly back toward the town lights. My heart was pounding and the wind was howling in my ears. After about 20 seconds, I looked back. The person had stopped. They were standing exactly where the dry sand met the water, completely still again, watching me leave. I didn't stop walking until I reached the boardwalk near the houses. When I turned back one last time, the beach was empty. No figure, no movement, nothing. The next morning, I told a man at a small coffee shop what had happened. He didn't look surprised. He just nodded slowly and said something I still think about sometimes. Every few years, someone sees him. I asked, "Sees who?" The man took a sip of his coffee and said quietly, "Fisherman named Thomas Reed. His boat sank during a storm in 1998. They never found his body. I never filmed another night video on that beach. And to this day, when I hear waves at night, I sometimes remember that voice asking the same question over and over. Have you seen my boat?" This is in October 2019. My friend Ryan Carter and I had driven down from Portland after work. Ryan loved late-night photography, and he said the fog that rolled over Blackwood Beach created perfect horror movie lighting. At the time, that sounded cool. Now it just sounds like a warning we ignored. We got there around 10:30 p.m. The parking lot was empty except for an old blue pickup truck parked near the far corner. No lights. No one inside as far as we could see. Ryan joked, probably a fisherman sleeping. We grabbed our gear and walked down the wooden path toward the sand. The tide was low and the fog hung close to the ground like a blanket. You could only see maybe 50 feet ahead. The beach was quiet, too quiet. The waves sounded distant, like they were far away, even though they were right in front of us. Ryan started setting up his camera while I walked closer to the shoreline. The sand felt damp and cold under my shoes. That's when I noticed footprints. A lot of them. They started near the water and walked up toward the dunes behind us. Bare footprints. Dozens of them. At first I thought maybe someone had walked along the beach earlier that day. But something about them felt wrong. They were too deep. Like whoever made them had been running or dragging something heavy. "Ryan," I called. "Come look at this." He walked over with his flashlight and shined along the sand. The beam followed the prints for about 30 feet before they disappeared into the fog. Ryan frowned. "These are fresh," he said quietly. "How do you know?" The tide would have washed them away. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my neck. That meant whoever made them had been here recently. Maybe still here. Ryan laughed it off, trying to lighten the mood. "Relax, man. Probably some drunk guy wandering around." But as we kept looking, we realized something worse. There were no footprints leading back to the water, only away from it. Then we heard something, a faint scraping sound coming from the dunes behind us. Ryan turned his flashlight toward the tall grass. The beam cut through the fog, but we couldn't see much beyond the first few feet. The sound stopped. For a moment, everything went silent again. Then Ryan whispered, "Did you hear that?" Before I could answer, the scraping started again. Slow, deliberate, like someone pulling something heavy across the sand. Ryan called out hello. No answer. The fog shifted slightly, and for a split second, I thought I saw a shape moving inside the grass. Tall. Too tall. And then it dropped down out of sight. Ryan nervously chuckled. Probably an animal. But his voice didn't sound convinced. That's when the smell hit us. Rotting. Strong enough to make me gag. Ryan covered his nose. What the hell is that? The scraping sound suddenly stopped again, and then we heard something else. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Coming from somewhere in the fog behind us. Ryan slowly turned the flashlight in that direction. The beam landed on the sand, right where we had been standing moments earlier. And that's when we saw new footprints. Barefoot. Deep. Appearing one by one in the sand. As if someone invisible was walking toward us. Ryan whispered, "Dude, run." But before we could move, the breathing came from right beside my ear. I froze. For a second I couldn't even breathe. The sound was so close it felt like someone was standing right behind me. Ryan grabbed my arm and pulled me forward. Move. We ran toward the wooden path leading back to the parking lot. The fog made it hard to see more than a few steps ahead, and I nearly tripped over driftwood as we sprinted across the sand. Behind us, that scraping sound started again, but this time was faster, closer. Ryan glanced back and shined his flashlight behind us. His face immediately went pale. "Don't look," he said. Of course I did. At first I didn't understand what I was seeing. Something was crawling out of the dunes. Not walking, crawling. It moved low to the ground, dragging itself across the sand with long arms. Its skin looked pale in the flashlight beam, almost gray. And it was thin, unnaturally thin, like its bones were pushing against its skin. The thing's head turned toward us. The fog shifted just enough for the light to catch its face. I wish it hadn't. Its mouth hung open too wide, and its eyes looked completely black in the dark. Ryan shouted, "Run." We sprinted harder. The wooden walkway appeared through the fog, and we ran up the steps two at a time. The parking lot was just ahead. I heard the thing hit the wood behind us. The sound of its hands slapping the planks made my stomach twist. Ryan dropped his camera bag as we reached the top of the path. "Forget it," he yelled. We ran straight to the car. Ryan fumbled with the keys while I turned back toward the walkway. For a moment I thought we'd lost it. The fog swallowed the path again. No movement. No sound. Then the wooden boards creaked. Slowly. Something was climbing the stairs. Ryan finally unlocked the car, and we jumped inside. He started the engine, just as the fog near the walkway shifted again. And I saw it, standing halfway down the path. Tall now. Much taller than when it crawled. Its arms hung almost to the ground. It just stood there, watching us. Ryan slammed the car into reverse and backed out of the lot so fast the tires screeched against the pavement. Neither of us spoke until we were several miles down the road. Finally, Ryan said, "Tell me you saw that too." I nodded, but something about the encounter still bothered me. Something I didn't realize until the next morning. Ryan had dropped his camera bag at the base of the walkway. Inside that bag were his camera, lenses, and the memory card. All the photos he had taken that night. Later that day, Ryan called the local park ranger station to report what happened. They told him something strange. About 2 months earlier, a couple walking their dog had reported seeing someone crawling along the beach at night near the same dunes. The rangers searched the area, but found nothing, except for deep barefoot tracks in the sand. Tracks that started near the water and disappeared into the fog. Ryan never went back to Blackwood Beach. Neither did I. But sometimes I still think about that moment when the breathing was right beside my ear. And the worst part, if those footprints started near the ocean, then whatever we saw that night didn't come from the dunes. It came out of the water, and something tells me it's probably still there, waiting in the fog for the next people who think a quiet beach at night is peaceful.